out of the village, as if there would be any village at all left without him. Brandon only half listened to the conversation, but this last nudged him to speak. What did they do? Why, she called Bullet.
While looking at him as though she were the one in charge. She might be controlling her tongue, but certainly not her eyes. After a time, Bryn turned away. "Take your place with your friends, girl," he told Liana as he returned to his chair. She joined them with a look of open frustration, and what in anyone else Min would have called a touch of petulance. "I have reached my decision," Bryn said to the room at large. "The crimes are serious, and nothing I have heard alters the facts. If 3 men sneak into another's house to steal his candlesticks, and one of them attacks the owner, all 3 are equally guilty. There must be recompense. Master Nem, I will give you the cost of rebuilding your barn, plus the price of 6 milk cows." The stout farmer's eyes brightened until Bryn added, "Caroline will disperse the coin to you when she is content as to costs and prices. Some of your cows were going dry, I hear." The slim woman in gray nodded in satisfaction. "For the bump on your head, I award you 1 silver mark. Don't complain," he said firmly as Nem opened his mouth. "My gun has given you worse for drinking too much." A ripple of laughter among the onlookers greeted that, not diminished at all by Nem's half-abashed glares, and perhaps spurred by the tight-lipped look Mygan gave her husband. "I will also replace the amount of the stolen purse, once Caroline has satisfied herself as to how much was in it." Nem and his wife appeared equally disgruntled, but they held their tongues. It was plain he had given them what he would. Min began to feel hope. Leaning his elbows on the table, Bryn turned his attention to her and the other 2. His slow words tied her stomach into a knot. "You 3 will work for me, at the normal wages for whatever tasks you are given, until the coin I've paid out is repaid to
Out of the
me. Do not think I am being lenient. If you swear an oath that satisfies me you don't have to be guarded, you can work in my manor. If not, it's the fields, where you can be under someone's eyes every minute. Wages are lower in the fields, but it is your decision." Frantically she racked her brain for the weakest oath that might satisfy. She did not like breaking her word in any circumstances, but she meant to be gone as soon as a chance presented, and she did not want too heavy an oath-breaking on her conscience. Liana seemed to be searching too, but Swan barely hesitated before kneeling and folding her hands over her heart. Her eyes seemed fastened to Bryn's, and the challenge had not faded one bit. "By the light and my hope of salvation and rebirth, I swear to serve you in whatever way you require for as long as you require. Or may the Creator's face turn from me forever, and darkness consume my soul." She delivered the words in a breathy whisper, but they created a dead silence. There was no oath stronger, unless it was the one a woman took on being made Aes Sedai, and the oath rod bound her to that as surely as to a part of her flesh. Liana stared at Swan, then she was on her knees too. "By the light and my hope of salvation and rebirth." Min floundered desperately, searching for some way out. Swearing a lesser oath than they did meant the fields for certain, and someone watching her every instant. But this oath, by what she had been taught, breaking it would be not much less than murder, maybe no less. Only there was no way out. The oath, or who knew how many years laboring in a field all day and probably locked up at night. Sinking down beside the other 2 women, she muttered the words, but inside she was howling. "Swan, you utter fool! What have you gotten me into now? I can't stay here. I have to go to Rand. Oh, light, help me." "Well," Bryn breathed, when the last word was spoken, "I did not expect that, but it does suffice. Caroline, would you take Master Nem somewhere and find out what he thinks his losses amount to, and clear everyone else but these 3 out of here too, and make arrangements to transport them to the manor. Under the circumstances, I don't think guards will be necessary." The slim woman gave him a harassed look, But in short order she had everyone moving out in a milling throng. Admiral Nem and his male kin stuck close to her, his face especially painted with avarice. The Nem women looked scarcely less greedy, but they still spared a few hard glowers for Min and the other two, who remained kneeling as the room emptied out. For herself, Min did not believe her legs could hold her up. The same phrases repeated over and over in her mind. "Oh, Swan, why? I can't stay here. I can't." "We have had a few refugees through here," Bryn said when the last of the villagers had gone. He leaned back in his chair, studying them. "But never as odd a threesome as you. A Damani." "A Tyran?" Swan nodded curtly. She and Liana stood up, the slender, coppery-skinned woman delicately brushing her knees, Swan simply standing. Min managed to join them on wobbly legs. "And you, Serenla?" Once more he gave the ghost of a smile at the name.
One second.
"Somewhere in the west of Andor, unless I mistake your accent." "Bearlawn," she muttered, then bit her tongue too late. Someone might know Min was from Bearlawn. "I've heard of nothing in the west to make you refugees," he said in a questioning tone. When she remained silent, he did not press it. "After you have worked off your debt, you will be welcome to remain in my service. Life can be hard for those who've lost their homes, and even a maid's cot is better than sleeping under a bush." "Thank you, my lord," Liana said caressingly, making a curtsy so graceful that even in her rough riding dress it looked part of a dance. Min's echo was leaden, and she did not trust her knees for a curtsy. Swan simply stood there staring at him and said nothing at all. "A pity your companion took your horses. 4 horses would reduce your debt by some." "He was a stranger and a rogue," Liana told him, in a voice suitable for something far more intimate. "I, for one, am more than happy to exchange his protection for yours, my lord." Bryn eyed her, appreciatively, Min thought, but all he said was, "At least you will be safely away from the Nems at the manor." There was no reply for that. Min supposed scrubbing floors in Bryn's manor would not be much different from scrubbing floors in the Nem farmhouse. "How do I get out of this? Light, how?" The silence went on, except for Bryn drumming his fingers on the table. Min would have thought he was at a loss for what to say next, but she did not think this man was ever off balance. More likely he was irritated that only Liana appeared to be showing any gratitude. She supposed their sentence could have been much worse, from his point of view. Perhaps Liana's heated glances and stroking tones had worked after a fashion, but Min found herself wishing the woman had remained the way she was. Being hung up by the wrists in the village square would be better than this. Finally Caroline returned, muttering to herself. She sounded prickly, reporting to Bryn.
Hey,
"It
Christopher,
will
how you
take
doing,
days
bro?
to get straight answers
I hope
from
you're
those
doing
Nems,
good.
Lord Gareth. Admer would have 5 new barns and 50 cows if I let him. At least I believe there really was a purse, but as to how much was in it..." She shook her head and sighed. "I will find out eventually. Joni is ready to take these girls to the manor if you are done with them." "Take them away, Caroline," Bryn said, rising. "When you've sent them off, join me at the brickyard." He sounded weary again. "Thad Heron says he needs more water if he's to keep making...
Salut Chris, j'espère que tu vas bien.
if he's to keep making bricks, and the light alone knows where I will find it for him." He strode out of the common room as if he had forgotten all about the 3 women who had just sworn to serve him. Joni turned out to be the wide, balding man who had come for them in the shed, waiting now in front of the inn beside a high-wheeled cart, enclosed by a round canvas cover, with a lean brown horse in the shafts. A few of the villagers stood about to watch their departure, but most seemed to have gone back to their homes and out of the heat. Gareth Bryn was already far down the dirt street. "Joni will see you safely to the manor," Caroline said. "Do as you are told, and you will not find the life hard." For a moment she considered them, dark eyes nearly as sharp as Swan's. Then she nodded to herself, as if satisfied, and hurried off after Bryn. Joni held the curtains open for them at the back of the cart, but let them clamber up unaided and find places to sit on the cart bed. There was not so much as a handful of straw for padding, and the heavy covering trapped the heat. He said not a word. The cart rocked as he climbed up on the driver's seat, hidden by the canvas. Min heard him cluck to the horse, and the cart lurched off, wheels creaking slightly, bumping over occasional
Oh, yeah.
potholes.
That's
There was
good,
just
Chris.
enough of a crack in the covering at the back for Min
Let's
to
do a little
watch the
dab while
village
you're
dwindle
here.
behind them and vanish, replaced alternately by long thickets and rail-fenced fields. She felt too stunned to speak. Swan's grand cause was to end scrubbing pots and floors. She should never have helped the woman, never stayed with her. She should have ridden for Tyr at the first opportunity. Well, Liana said suddenly, that worked out not badly at all. She was back to her usual brisk voice again, but there was a flush of excitement in it, and a high color in her cheeks. It could have been better, but practice will take care of that. Her low laugh was almost a giggle. I never realized how much fun it could be, when I actually felt his pulse racing. For a moment she held out her hand the way she had placed it on Bryn's wrist. I don't think I ever felt so alive, so aware. Aunt Rosara used to say men were better sport than hawks, but I never
I
really
guess it would help if
understood
I
until
loaded it
today.
first.
Holding herself against the sway of the cart, Min goggled at her. You have gone mad, she said finally. How many years have we sworn away? 2? 5? I suppose you hope Gareth Bryn will spend them dandling you on his knee. Well, I hope he turns you over it. Every day. The startled look on Liana's face did nothing for Min's temper. Did she expect Min to take it as calmly as she appeared to? But it was not Liana that Min was really angry with. She twisted around to glare at Swan.
I'll be
And
right back.
you, when you decide to give up, you don't do it small. You just surrender like a lamb at slaughter. Why did you choose that oath? Right. Why? Because, Swan replied. It was the one oath I could be sure would keep him from setting people to watch us night and day, manor house or not. Lying half stretched out on the rough planks of the cart, she made it sound the most obvious thing in the world, and Liana appeared to agree with her. You mean to break it, Min said after a moment. It came out in a shocked whisper, but even so she glanced worriedly at the canvas curtains that hid Joni. She did not think he could have heard. I mean to do what I must, Swan said firmly, but just as softly. In 2 or 3 days, when I can be sure they really aren't watching us especially, we will leave. I fear we must take horses, since ours are gone. Bryn must have good stables. I will regret that. And Liana just sat there like a cat with cream on her whiskers. She must have realized from the first. That was why she had not hesitated in swearing. You will regret stealing horses? Min said hoarsely. You plan to break an oath anyone but a dark friend would keep, and you regret stealing horses? I can't believe either of you. I don't know either of you. Do you really mean to stay and scrub pots? Liana asked, her voice just as low as theirs, when Rand is out there with your heart in his pocket. Min glowered silently. She wished they had never learned she was in love with Rand al'Thor. Sometimes she wished she had never learned it. A man who barely knew she was alive. A man like that. What he was no longer seemed as important as the fact that he had never looked at her twice, but it was all of a piece, really. She wanted to say she would keep her oath, forget about Rand for however long it took her to work off her debt. Only she could not open her mouth. Burn him. If I'd never met him, I wouldn't be in this pickle. The silence between them had gone on far too long for Min's liking, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the wheels and the soft thud of the horse's hooves. Swan spoke. I mean to do as I swore to do, when I have finished what I must do first. I did not swear to serve him immediately. I was careful not to even imply it, strictly speaking. A fine point, I know, and one Gareth Bryn might not appreciate, but true all the same.
Okay, let's get this
Min
dab done.
sagged in amazement, letting herself lurch with the cart's slow motion. You intend to run away? Then come back in a few years and hand yourselves over to Bryn? The man will sell your hides to a tannery. Our hides. Not until she said that did she realize she had accepted Swan's solution. Run away, then come back and, I can't. I love Rand, and he wouldn't notice if Gareth Bryn made me work in his kitchens the rest of my life. Not a man to cross, I agree, Swan sighed. I met him once, before. I was terrified he might recognize my voice today. Faces may change, but voices don't. She touched her own face wonderingly, as she sometimes did, apparently unaware of doing so. Faces do change, she murmured. Then her tone firmed. I've paid heavy prices already for what I had to do, and I will pay this one, eventually. If you have to drown or ride a lionfish, you ride and hope for the best. That is all there is to it, Serenla. Being a servant is far from the future I would choose, Liana said. But it is in the future, and who knows what may happen before. I can remember too well when I thought I had no future.
You have a good night, too.
A small smile appeared on her lips, her eyes half closed dreamily, and her voice became velvet. Besides, I don't think he will sell our hides at all. Give me a few years of practice, and then a few minutes with Lord Gareth Bryn, and he will greet us with open arms and put us up in his best rooms. He'll deck us with silks, and offer his carriage to carry us wherever we want to go. Min left her wrapped in her fantasy. Sometimes she thought the other two both lived in dream worlds. Something else occurred to her, a small thing, but it was beginning to irritate. Mara, tell me something. I've noticed some people smile when you call me by name. Serenla. Bryn did, and he said something about my mother having a premonition. Why? In the old tongue, Swan replied, it means stubborn daughter. You did have a stubborn streak when we first met, a mile wide and a mile deep. Swan said that. Swan, the most stubborn woman in the whole world. Her smile was as wide as her face. Of course, you do seem to be coming along. At the next village, you might use Chalinda. That means sweet girl. Or maybe... Suddenly the cart gave a harder lurch than any before, then picked up speed as if the horse were reaching for a gallop. Bumping around like grain on a chafing sieve, the three women stared at one another in surprise. Then Swan levered herself up and pulled aside the canvas hiding the driver's seat. Joni was gone. Throwing herself across the wooden seat, Swan grabbed the reins and reared back, hauling the horse to a halt. Min threw open the back curtains, searching. The road ran through a thicket here, nearly a small forest of oak and elm, pine and leatherleaf. The dust of their short dash was still settling, some of it on Joni, where he lay sprawled by the side of the hard-packed dirt road, 60 or so paces back. Instinctively, Min leaped down and ran back to kneel beside the big man. He was still breathing, but his eyes were closed, and a bloody gash on the side of his head was coming up in a purple lump. Liana pushed her aside and felt Joni's head with sure fingers. He will live, she said crisply. Nothing seems broken, but he will have a headache for days after he wakes. Sitting back on her heels, she folded her hands, and her voice saddened. There is nothing I can do for him in any case. Burn me. I promised myself I would not cry over it again. The question... Min swallowed and started again. The question is, do we load him in the back of the cart and take him on to the manor, or do we go? Light, I'm no better than Swan. We could carry him as far as the next farm, Liana said slowly. Swan came up to them, leading the cart-horse as if afraid the placid animal might bite. One glance at the man on the ground, and she frowned. They never had that falling off the cart. I don't see root or rock here to cause it. She started studying the wood around them, and a man rode out of the trees on a tall black stallion, leading 3 mares, one shaggy and 2 hands shorter than the others. He was a tall man in a blue silk coat, with a sword at his side, his hair curling to broad shoulders, darkly handsome despite a hardening, as though misfortune had marked him deeply. And he was the last man Min expected to see. Is this your work? Swan demanded of him. Logain smiled as he reined in beside the cart, though there was little amusement in it. A sling is a useful thing, Mara. You are lucky I am here. I didn't expect you to leave the village for some hours yet, and barely able to walk then. The local lord was indulgent, it seems. Abruptly his face went even darker, and his voice was rough stone. Did you think I would leave you to your fate? Maybe I should have. You made promises to me, Mara. I want the revenge you promised. I've followed you halfway to the Sea of Storms on this search, though you won't tell me what for. I've asked no questions as to how you plan to give me what you promised, but I will tell you this now. Your time is growing short. End your search soon and deliver your promises, or I will leave you to find your own way. You'll quickly find most villages offer small sympathy to penniless strangers. 3 pretty women alone. The sight of this, he touched the sword at his hip, has kept you safe more times than you can know. Find what you are seeking soon, Mara. Self, see how far you get with your Sometimes she saw things about people. Viewings, she called them, images or auras. Sometimes she knew what they meant. That woman would marry. That man would die. Small matters or grand events, joyous or bleak. There was never any rhyme or reason to who or where or when. Aes Sedai and warders always had auras. Most people never did. It was not always pleasant, knowing. He'd seen Logain's halo before, and she knew what it meant. Glory to come. But for him, perhaps above all men, surely that made no sense at all. His horse and his sword and his coat had come from playing at dice, though Min was not certain how fair the games had been. He had nothing else, and no prospects except Swan's promises, and how could Swan ever keep them? His very name was likely a death sentence. It just made no sense. Logain's humor returned as suddenly as it had gone. Pulling a fat, roughly woven purse from his belt, he jangled it at them. I've come by a few coins. We won't have to sleep in another barn for a while. We heard of it, Swan said dryly. I suppose I should have expected no better from you. I think it was a contribution to your search. She stretched out her hand, but he tied the purse back to his belt with a faintly mocking grin. I would not want to taint your hand with stolen coin, Mara. Besides, this way, perhaps I can be sure you won't run off and leave me. Swan looked as if she could have bitten a nail in two, but she said nothing. Standing in his stirrups, Logain peered down the road toward Core Springs. I see a flock of sheep coming this way and a pair of boys. Time for us to ride. They'll carry word of this as fast as they can run. Settling back down, he glanced at Joni, still lying there unconscious. And they'll fetch help for that fellow. I don't think I hit him hard enough to hurt him badly. Min shook her head. The man continually surprised her. She would not have thought he would spare a second thought for a man whose head he had just cracked. Swan and Lyanna wasted no time scrambling into their high-cantled saddles, Lyanna onto the gray mare she called Moonflower, Swan onto Bella, the short, shaggy mare. It was more of a scramble for Swan. She was no horsewoman. After weeks in the saddle, she still treated sedate Bella like a fiery-eyed warhorse. Lyanna handled Moonflower with effortless ease. Min knew she was somewhere in between. She climbed onto Wild Rose, her bay, with considerably more grace than Swan, considerably less than Lyanna. Do you think he will come after us? Min asked as they started south, away from Core Springs, at a trot. She meant the question for Swan, but it was Logain who answered. The local lord? I doubt he thinks you important enough. Of course he may send a man, and he'll certainly spread your descriptions. We will ride as far as we can manage before stopping, and again tomorrow. It seemed he was taking charge. Aren't important enough, Swan said, bouncing awkwardly in her saddle. She might have been wary of Bella, but the look she directed at Logain's back said his challenge to her authority would not last long. For herself, Min hoped Bryn considered them unimportant. He probably did. As long as he never learned their real names. Logain quickened the stallion's pace, and she heeled Wild Rose to keep up, putting her thoughts ahead, not behind.
Tucking his leather gauntlets behind his sword belt, Gareth Bryn picked up the curl-brimmed velvet hat from his writing table. The hat was the latest fashion from Camelin. Carlin had seen to that. He had no care for fashion, but she thought he should dress suitably for his position, and it was the silks and velvets she laid out for him in the mornings. As he set the high-crowned hat on his head, he caught sight of his shadowy reflection in one of the study windows. Fitting that it was so wavery and thin. Squint as much as he would, his gray hat and gray silk coat, embroidered with silver scrolls down the sleeves and collar, looked nothing like the helmet and armor he was used to. That was over and done. And this was something to fill empty hours, that was all. Are you certain you want to do this, Lord Gareth? He turned from the window to where Carlin stood beside her own writing table, across the room from his. Hers was piled with the estate account books. She had run his estates all the years he had been gone, and without doubt she still made a better job of it than he did. If you had set them to work for Adnor Nem, as the law required, she went on, this would be none of your affair at all. But I did not, he told her, and would not if I had it to do again. You know as well as I do, Nem and his male kin would be trying to corner those girls day and night. And Megan, and the rest of the women, would make their lives the pit of doom. That is, if all three girls didn't accidentally fall down a well and drown. Even Megan would not use a well, Carlin said dryly, not with the weather we've been having. Still, I take your point, Lord Gareth. But they must have had most of a day and a night to run in any direction. You will locate them as soon by sending out word of them, if they can be found. Thad can find them. Thad was over 70, but he could still track yesterday's wind across stone by moonlight, and he had been more than happy to turn the brickyard over to his son. If you say so, Lord Gareth. He and Thad did not get on. Well, when you bring them back, I can certainly use them in the house. Something in her voice, casual as it was, pricked his attention. A touch of satisfaction. Practically from the day he arrived home, Carlin had introduced a succession of pretty maids and farm girls into the manor house, all willing and eager to help the lord forget his miseries. They are oath breakers, Carlin. I fear it's the fields for them. A brief, exasperated tightening of her lips confirmed his suspicions, but she kept her tone indifferent. The other two, perhaps, Lord Gareth, but the Domani girl's grace would be wasted in the fields, and would suit serving at table very well. A remarkably pretty young woman. Still, it will be as you wish, of course. So that was the one Carlin had picked out. A remarkably pretty young woman indeed, though oddly different from the Domani women he had met. A touch hesitant here, a touch too fast there. Almost as if she were just now trying out her arts for the first time. That was impossible, of course. Domani women trained their daughters to twine men around their fingers almost from the cradle. Not that she had been ineffective, he admitted. If Carlin had sprung her on him among the farm girls, remarkably pretty. But why was it not her face that kept filling his mind? Why did he find himself thinking of a pair of blue eyes, challenging him as though wishing she had a sword, afraid and refusing to yield to fear? Mara Tomanis. He had been sure she was one to keep her word, even without oaths. I will bring her back, he muttered to himself. I will know why she broke oath. As you say, my lord, Carolyn said. I thought she might do for your bedchamber maid. Selah is getting a bit old to be running up and down the stairs to fetch for you at night. Bryn blinked at her. What? Oh, the Domani girl. He shook his head at Carlin's foolishness. But was he being any less foolish? He was the lord here. He should remain here to take care of his people. Yet Carlin had taken better care than he knew how all the years he was gone. New camps and soldiers and campaigns, and maybe a bit of how to maneuver in court intrigues. She was right. He should take off his sword and his fool hat and have Carlin write out the descriptions, and instead he said, "Keep a close eye on Admiral Nem and his kin. They'll try to cheat you as much as they can." "As you say, my lord." The words were perfectly respectful. The tone told him to go teach his grandfather to shear sheep. Chuckling to himself, he went outside. The manor house was really little more than a tremendously overgrown farmhouse. 2 rambling stories of brick and stone under a slate roof, added to again and again by generations of Bryns. House Bryn had owned this land, or it had owned them, since Andor was wrought from the wreckage of Arthur Hawkwing's empire 1,000 years before. And for all that time, it had sent its sons off to fight Andor's wars. He would fight no more wars, but it was too late for House Bryn. There had been too many years, too many battles. He was the last of the blood. No wife, no son, no daughter. The line ended with him. Things had to end. The wheel of time turned. 20 men waited beside saddled horses on the stone-paved yard in front of the manor house. Men even grayer than he, mostly, if they had hair. Experienced soldiers all, former squadmen, squadron leaders, and bannermen who had served with him at one time or another in his career. Johnny Chagrin, who had been senior bannerman of the Guards, was right at the front with a bandage around his temples, though Bryn knew for a fact his daughters had set their children to keep him in his bed. He was one of the few who had any family, here or anywhere else. Most had chosen to come serve Gareth Bryn again, rather than drink away their pensions over reminiscences no one but another old soldier wanted to hear. All wore swords belted over their coats, and a few carried long steel-tipped lances that hung for years on a wall until this very morning. Every saddle had a fat blanket roll behind and bulging saddlebags, plus a pot or kettle and full water bags, just as if they were riding out on campaign instead of a week's jaunt to chase down 3 women who set fire to a barn. Here was a chance to relive old days, or pretend to. He wondered if that was what was rousting him out. He was certainly too old to go riding off after a set of pretty eyes on a woman young enough to be his daughter, maybe his granddaughter. "I am not that big a fool," he told himself firmly. Carlin could manage things better with him not getting in the way. A lanky bay gelding came galloping up the oak lane that led down to the road, and the rider threw himself out of the saddle before the animal came to a full stop. The man half stumbled, but still managed to put fist to heart in a proper salute. Barim Halla, who served under him as a senior squadman years ago, was hard and wiry, with a leather egg for a head and white eyebrows that seemed to be trying to make up for the lack of other hair. "You've been recalled to Camelin, my Captain General?" he panted. "No," Bryn said, too sharply. "What do you mean riding in here as though you had carrion and cavalry on your tail?" Some of the other horses were frisking, catching the bay's mood. "Never rode that hard unless we was chasing them, my lord." Barim's grin faded when the man saw he was not laughing. "Well, my lord, I seen the horses, and I reckoned—" The man took another look at his face and cut off that line. "Well, actually, I got some news, too. I've been over to New Braham to see my sister, and I heard plenty." New Braham was older than Andor. Old Braham had been destroyed in the Trolloc Wars 1,000 years before Arthur Hawkwing, and it was a good place for news. A middling-sized border town, well to the east of his estates, on the road from Camelin to Tarvalin. Even with Morghase's current attitude, the merchants would keep that road busy. "Well, out with it, man. If there's news, what is it?" Just trying to figure where to start, my lord." Barim straightened unconsciously, as though making a report. "Most important, I reckon. They say Tyr has fallen. Ailman took the stone itself, and the sword that cannot be touched has flat been touched. Somebody drew it, they say. Aiel drew it, Bryn said incredulously. And Aiel would die before he touched a sword. He had seen it happen in the Aiel War. Though it was said Kalendor was not really a sword at all, whatever that meant. I didn't say, my lord. I heard names. Vren somebody or other most often. But they was talking it like fact, not rumor. Like everybody knew. Bryn's forehead creased in a frown. Worse than troubling, if true. If Kalendor had been drawn, then the dragon was reborn. According to the prophecies, that meant the last battle was coming, the Dark One breaking free. The dragon reborn would save the world, so the prophecies said, and destroy it. This was news enough by itself to have set Holly galloping, if he had thought twice. But the leathery fellow was not finished. It come down from Tarvalin is near as big, my lord. They say there's a new Amerlin seat. Elida, my lord, who was the queen's advisor. Blinking suddenly, Hala hurried on. Morgaze was forbidden ground, and every man on the estate knew it, though Bryn had never said so. They say the old Amerlin, Swan Sanche, was stilled and executed, and Logain died too, that false dragon they caught in Gentle last year. They talked it like it was true, my lord. Some of them claimed they was in Tarvalin when it all happened. Logain was no great news, even if he had started a war in Gillidan by claiming to be the Dragon Reborn. There had been several false dragons the last few years. He could channel, though. That was a fact. Until the Aes Sedai gentled him. Well, he was not the first man to be caught and gentled, cut off from the power, so he could never channel again. They said men like that, whether false dragons or just poor fools the Red Adjet took against, never lived long. It was said they gave up wanting to live. Swan Sanche, though, that was news. He had met her once, nearly 3 years ago. A woman who demanded obedience and gave no reasons. Tough as an old boot, with a tongue like a file and a temper like that of a bear with a sore tooth. He would have expected her to tear any upstart claimant limb from limb with her bare hands. Stilling was the same as gentling for a man, but more rare by far, especially for an Amerlin seat. Only 2 Amerlins in 3,000 years had suffered that fate, so far as the tower admitted, though it was possible they could have hidden 24 more. Tower was very good at hiding what they wanted hidden. But an execution on top of Stilling seemed unnecessary. It was said women survived Stilling no better than men did gentling. It all stank of trouble. Everyone knew the Tower had secret alliances, strings tied to thrones and powerful lords and ladies. With a new Amerlin raised in this fashion, some would surely try to test whether the Aes Sedai still watched as closely. And once this fellow in Tyr quelled any opposition, not that there was likely to be much if he really did have the stone, he would move against Ilion or Kyrian. The question was, how quickly could he move? Would forces be gathered against him, or for him? He had to be the true dragon reborn, but the houses would go both ways, and the people too. And if petty squabbles broke out because the Tower... Old fool, he muttered. Seeing Barham give a start, he added, Not you, another old fool. None of this was his affair any longer, except to decide which way House Bryn went when the time came. Not that anyone would care, except to know whether or not to attack him. Bryn had never been a powerful house, or large. My lord, Barham glanced at the men waiting with their horses. Do you think you might need me, my lord? Without even asking where or why. He was not the only one bored with country life. Catch up to us when you have your gear together. We'll be heading south on the Four Kings Road to start. Barham saluted and dashed away, dragging his horse behind him. Coming into his saddle, Bryn swung his arm forward without a word, and the men fell into a column of 2s behind him as they headed down the oak lane. He meant to have answers. If he had to take this Mara by the scruff of the neck and shake her, he would have answers.
High Lady Altima relaxed as the gates of the royal palace of Andor swung open and her carriage rolled in. She had not been certain they would open. It had surely taken long enough to get a note taken in, and longer still to have a reply. Her maid, a thin girl acquired here in Camelin, goggled and all but bounced on the seat across from her at the excitement of actually entering the palace. Snapping open her lace fan, Altima tried to cool herself. It was still well short of midday. The heat would grow worse yet. To think she had always thought of Andor as cool. Hastily she reviewed what she meant to say one last time. She was a pretty woman. She knew exactly how pretty, with large brown eyes that made some mistakenly think her innocent, even harmless. She knew she was neither, but it suited her very well to have others believe her so, especially here, today. This carriage had taken almost the last of the gold she had managed to carry away when she fled Tyr. If she was to re-establish herself, she needed powerful friends, and there was none more powerful in Andor than the woman she had come to see. The carriage halted near a fountain in a column-ringed courtyard, and a servant in red and white livery rushed to open the door. Altima barely glanced at the courtyard or the serving man. Her mind was all on the meeting ahead. Black hair spilled to the middle of her back from beneath a close-fitting cap of seed pearls, and more pearls lined the tiny pleats of her high-necked gown of watery green silk. She had met Morghese once, briefly, 5 years ago during a state visit, a woman who radiated power, as reserved and stately as one should expect of a queen, and also proper in the Andoran way, which meant prim. The rumors in the city that she had a lover, a man not much liked, it seemed, did not fit that very well, of course. But from what Altima remembered, the formality of the gown and the high neck should please Morghese. As soon as Altima's slippers were firmly on the paving stones, the maid, Kara, leaped down and began fussing over the fall of the pleats, until Altima snapped her fan
I'll
shut
be
and
right
slapped
back,
the girl's
everyone.
wrist with it. A courtyard was no place for that. Kara, such a foolish name, flinched back, clutching her wrist with a wounded look and the beginnings of tears. Altima compressed her lips in irritation. The girl did not even know how to take mild reproof. She had been fooling herself. The girl would not do. She was too obviously untrained. But a lady had to have a maid, especially if she was to differentiate herself from the mass of refugees in Andor. She had seen men and women laboring in the sun, even begging in the streets, while wearing the remnants of Kyrian and noble's garb. She thought she had recognized one or two. Perhaps she should take one of them in service. Who could know the duties of a lady's maid better than a lady? And if they were reduced to working with their hands, they should leap at the chance. It might be amusing to have a former friend for a maid. Too late for today, though. And an untrained maid, a local girl, said a little too clearly that Altima was at the edge of her resources, only one step removed from those beggars herself. She put on a look of concerned gentleness. "Did I hurt you, Kara?" she said sweetly. "Remain here in the carriage and soothe your wrist. I'm certain someone will bring you cool water to drink." The mindless gratitude on the girl's face was stupefying. The liveried men, well trained, stood looking at nothing at all. Still, word of Altima's kindness would spread if she knew anything about servants. A tall young man appeared before her in the white-collared red coat and burnished breastplate of the Queen's Guard, bowing with a hand to his sword hilt. "I am Guardsman Lieutenant Talanvor, High Lady. If you will come with me, I will escort you to Queen Morghese." He offered an arm, which she took, but otherwise she was scarcely aware of him. She had no interest in soldiers, unless generals and lords. As he attended her down broad corridors, seemingly full of scurrying men and women in livery, they took care not to impede her way, of course. She subtly examined the fine wall hangings, the ivory-inlaid chests and high chests, the bowls and vases of chased gold or silver, or thin sea-folk porcelain. The royal palace did not display as much wealth as the Stone of Tyr, but Andor was still a wealthy land, perhaps even as wealthy as Tyr. An older lord would do nicely. malleable for a woman still young, perhaps a touch feeble and infirm, with vast estates. That would be a beginning, while she found out exactly where the strings of power lay in Andor. A few words exchanged with Morghese some years ago were not much of an introduction, but she had that which a powerful queen must want and need: information. Finally, Talanvor ushered her into a large sitting room with a high ceiling painted in birds and clouds and open sky, where ornately carved and gilded chairs stood before a polished white marble fireplace. A part of Altima's mind noted with amusement that the wide red and gold carpet was Tyran work. The young man went to one knee. "My queen," he said in a suddenly rough voice, "as you have commanded, I bring you the High Lady Altima of Tyr." Morghese waved him away. "You are welcome, Altima. It is good to see you again. Sit, and we will talk." Altima managed a curtsy and murmured thanks before taking a chair. Envy curdled inside her. She had remembered Morghese as a beautiful woman, but the golden-haired reality told her how pale that memory had grown. Morghese was a rose in full bloom, ready to overshadow every other flower. Altima did not blame the young soldier for stumbling on his way out. She was just glad he was gone, so she would not have to be aware of him looking at the two of them, comparing. Yet there were changes, too. Vast changes. Morghese, by the grace of the light, Queen of Andor, Defender of the Realm, Protector of the People, High Seat of House Trakand, so very reserved and stately and proper, wore a gown of shimmering white silk that showed enough bosom to shock a tavern maid in the mall. It clung to hip and thigh close enough to suit a Tarabonner jade. The rumors were clearly true. Morghese had a lover, and for her to have altered so much, it was equally clear that she tried to please this Gabriel, not make him please her. Morghese still radiated power and a presence that filled the room, but that dress transformed both to something less. Altima was doubly glad she had worn a high neck. A woman that deep in a man's thrall could lash out in a jealous rage on the smallest provocation, or none at all. If she met Gabriel, she would present him as near indifference as civility would allow. Even being suspected of thinking of poaching Morghese's lover could get her a hangman's noose instead of a rich husband on his last legs. She herself would have done the same. A woman in red and white livery brought wine, an excellent Morandian, and poured it into crystal goblets deeply engraved with the rearing lion of Andor. As Morghese took a goblet, Altima noticed her ring, a golden serpent eating its own tail. The great serpent ring was worn by some women who had trained in the White Tower, as Morghese had, without becoming Aes Sedai, as well as by Aes Sedai themselves. It was a 1,000-year tradition for the queens of Andor to be
Cheers,
tower-trained,
Chris.
but rumors were on every lip of a break between Morghese and Tar Valon, and the anti-Aes Sedai sentiment in the streets could have been quashed quickly had Morghese wanted to. Why was she still wearing the ring? Altima would be careful of her words until she knew the answer. The liveried woman withdrew to the far end of the room, out of earshot but close enough to see when the wine needed replenishing. Taking a sip, Morghese said, "It is long since we met. Is your husband well? Is he in Camelin with you?" Hastily, Altima shuffled her plans. She had not thought Morghese knew she had a husband, but she had always been able to think on the run. "Tidosian was well when I last saw him. The light sent he died soon, as well to get on with it. He was of some question about serving this Randall Thor, and that is a dangerous chasm to straddle. Why, lords have been hung as if they were common criminals." "Randall Thor," Morghese mused softly. "I met him once. He did not look like one who would name himself the Dragon Reborn. A frightened shepherd boy, trying not to show it. Yet, thinking back, he seemed to be looking for some escape." Her blue eyes looked inward. "Elida warned me of him." She seemed unaware of having spoken those last words. Elida was your advisor,
I'll
then?
be right back.
Altima said cautiously. She knew it was so, and it made the rumors of a break all the more difficult to believe. She
I
had
gotta
to
go
know if it
refill
was
my
true.
drink.
You have replaced her, now that she is Amarlin? Morghase's eyes snapped back into focus. I have not. The next instant, her voice softened again. My daughter Elaine is training in the tower. She has already been raised to the accepted. Altima fluttered her fan, hoping sweat was not breaking out on her forehead. If Morghese did not know her own feelings toward the tower, there was no way to speak safely. Her plans teetered on the edge of a precipice. Then Morghese rescued them and her. You say your husband was of two minds about Randall Thor, and you? She nearly sighed with relief. Morghese might be behaving like an untutored farm girl over this Gabriel, but she still had her sense when it came to power and possible dangers to her realm. I observed him closely, of course, in the stone. That should plant the seed, if it needed planting. He can channel, and a man who can channel is always to be feared. Yet he is the dragon reborn, there is no doubt. The stone fell, and Kalendor was in his hand when it did. The prophecies... I fear I must leave decisions of what to do about the dragon reborn to those who are wiser than I. I only know that I am afraid to remain where he rules. Even the High Lady of Tyr cannot match the courage of the Queen of Andor. The golden-haired woman gave her a shrewd look that made her afraid she had overdone the flattery. Some did not like it too open. But Morghese merely leaned back in her chair and sipped her wine. Tell me about him. This man who is supposed to save us, and destroy us doing it. Success. Or at least the beginnings of it. He is a dangerous man beyond any question of the power. A lion seems lazy, half asleep, until suddenly he charges. Then he is all speed and power. Randall Thor seems innocent, not lazy, and naive, not asleep. But when he charges, he has no proper respect for person or position at all. I did not exaggerate when I said he has hanged lords. He is a breeder of anarchy. In Tyr, under his new laws, even a high lord or lady can be called before a magistrate to be fined, or worse, on the charges of the meanest peasant or fisherman. He... She kept strictly to the truth as she saw it. She could tell the truth as quickly as a lie when it was necessary. Morghese sipped her wine and listened. Altima might have thought her lounging indolently, except that her eyes showed she was taking in every word and storing it. Must understand, Altima finished, that I have only touched the surface. Randall Thor and what he has done in Tyr are subjects for hours. You will have them, Morghese said, and in her mind Altima smiled. Success. Is it true, the queen went on, that he brought Aiel with him to the stone? Oh, yes. Great savages with their faces hidden half the time, and even the women ready to kill as soon as look. They followed him like dogs, terrorizing everyone, and took whatever they wanted from the stone. I had thought it must be the wildest rumor, Morghese reflected. There have been rumors this past year, but they have not come out of the waste in 20 years, not since the Aiel War. The world certainly does not need this Randall Thor bringing the Aiel down on us again. Her look sharpened again. You said followed. They have gone? Altima nodded. Just before I left Tyr, and he went with them. With them? Morghese exclaimed. I feared he was in Carian right this... You have a guest, Morghese? I should have been told, so I could greet her. A big man strode into the room, tall, his gold-embroidered red silk coat fitting massive shoulders and a deep chest. Altima did not need to see the radiant look on Morghese's face to name him as Lord Gabriel. The assurance with which he had interrupted the queen did that. He lifted a finger, and the serving woman curtsied and left quickly. He did not ask Morghese's permission to dismiss her servants from her presence either. He was darkly handsome, incredibly so, with wings of white at his temples. Composing her face to commonplace, Altima put on a marginally welcoming smile. suitable for an elderly uncle with neither power, wealth, nor influence. He might be gorgeous, but even if he did not belong to Morghese, he was not a man she would try manipulating unless she absolutely had to. There was perhaps even more of an air of power about him than about Morghese. Gabriel stopped by Morghese and put his hand on her bare shoulder in a very familiar way. She clearly came close to resting her cheek on the back of his hand, but his eyes were on Altima. She was used to men looking at her, but these eyes made her shift uneasily. They were far too penetrating, saw far too much. "You come from Tyr?" The sound of his deep voice sent a tingle through her. Her skin, even her bones, felt as though she'd been dipped in icy water, but oddly, her momentary anxiety melted. It was Morghese who answered. Altima could not seem to find her tongue with him watching her. "This is the High Lady Altima, Gabriel. She's been telling me all about the Dragon Reborn. She was in the Stone of Tyr when it fell. Gabriel, there really were Aiel—" The pressure of his hand cut her off. Irritation flashed across her face, but then it was gone, replaced by a smile beaming up at him. His eyes, still on Altima, sent that shiver through her again, and this time she gasped aloud. "So much talking must have fatigued you, Morghese," he said without shifting his gaze. "You do too much. Go to your bedchamber and sleep. Go now. I will wake you when you have rested enough." Morghese stood immediately, still smiling at him devotedly. Her eyes seemed slightly glazed. "Yes, I am tired. I will take a nap now, Gabriel." She glided from the room with never a glance at Altima, but Altima's attention was all on Gabriel. Her heart beat faster. Her breath quickened. He was surely the handsomest man she had ever seen. The grandest, the strongest, the most powerful. Superlatives rolled through her mind like a flood. Gabriel paid no more attention to Morghese's leaving than she did. Taking the chair the Queen had vacated, he leaned back with his boots stretched out in front of him. "Tell me why you came to Camelin, Altima." Again the chill ran through her. "The absolute truth, but keep it brief. You can give me details later if I want them." She did not hesitate. "I tried to poison my husband and had to flee before Tadosian and that trull Estanda could kill me instead, or worse. Randall Thor meant to let them do it as an example." Telling made her cringe. Not because it was a truth she had kept hidden, so much as because she found she wanted to please him more than anything else in the world, and she feared that he might send her away.
Yeah.
But he wanted the truth. "I chose Camelin because I could not bear Ilion, and though Andor is little better, Kyrin is in near ruins. In Camelin I can find a wealthy husband, or one who thinks he is my protector if need be, and use his power to—" He stopped her with a wave of his hand, chuckling. "A vicious little cat, though pretty. Perhaps pretty enough to keep, with your teeth and claws drawn." Suddenly his face became more intent. "Tell me what you know of Randall Thor, and especially his friends, if he has any, his companions, his allies." She told him, talking until her mouth and throat went dry, and her voice cracked and rasped. She never raised her goblet until he told her to drink. Then she gulped the wine down and spoke on. She could please him. She could please him better than Morghese could think of. Maids working in Morghese's bedchamber dropped hasty curtsies, surprised to see her there in the middle of the morning. Waving them out of the room, she climbed onto her bed, still in her dress. For a time she lay staring at the gilded carvings of the bedposts. No lions of Andor here, but roses, for the rose crown of Andor, but roses suited her better than lions. "Stop being stubborn," she chided herself, then wondered why. She had told Gabriel she was tired, or had he told her? Impossible! She was the Queen of Andor, and no man told her to do anything. Gareth! Now why had she thought of Gareth Bryn? He had certainly never told her to do anything. The Captain General of the Queen's Guards obeyed the Queen, not the other way around. But he had been stubborn, entirely capable of digging in his heels until she came around to his way. Why am I thinking of him? I wish he were here. That was ridiculous. She had sent him away for opposing her. About what no longer seemed quite clear, but that was not important. He had opposed her. She could remember the feelings she had had for him only dimly, as though he had been gone for years. Surely it had not been so long. Stop being stubborn. Her eyes closed, and she fell immediately into sleep, a sleep troubled by restless dreams of running from something she could not see.
Chapter 2. Rudian. High in the city of Rudian, Randall Thor looked out from a tall window. Whatever glass might have once been in it was long since gone. The shadows below slanted sharply east. A bard harp played softly in the room behind him. Sweat evaporated from his face almost as soon as it appeared. His red silk coat, damp between the shoulders, hung open in a fruitless bid for air, and his shirt was unlaced half down his chest. Night in the Aiel waste would bring freezing cold, but during daylight even a breeze was never cool. His hands above his head on the smooth stone window frame, his coat sleeves fell down to reveal the front part of the figure wrapped around each forearm. A golden-maned serpentine creature with eyes like the sun, scaled in scarlet and gold, each foot tipped with 5 golden claws. Part of his skin they were, not tattoos. They glittered like precious metals and polished gems, seemed almost alive in the late afternoon sun. Those marked him to the people on this side of the mountain range, variously called the Dragon Wall or the Spine of the World, as he who comes with the dawn. And like the herons branded into his palms, they marked him for those beyond the Dragon Wall too, according to the prophecies, as the Dragon Reborn. In both cases, prophesied to unite, save, and destroy. They were names he would have avoided if he could, but that time was long past, if it had ever existed, and he no longer thought of it, or if he did, on rare occasion, it was with the faint regret of a man recalling a foolish dream of his boyhood, as if he were not close enough to boyhood to remember every minute. Instead, he tried to think only of what he had to do. Fate and duty held him on the path like a rider's reins, but he had often been called stubborn. The end of the road must be reached, but if it could be attained by a different way, maybe it need not be the end. Small chance. No chance, almost certainly. The prophecies demanded his blood. Leon stretched below him, seared by a sun still pitiless as it sank toward craggy mountains, bleak, with barely a sign of vegetation. This rugged, broken land, where men had killed or died over a pool of water they could step across, was the last place on earth anyone would think to find a great city. Its long-ago builders had never finished their work. Impossibly tall buildings dotted the city, stepped and slab-sided palaces that sometimes ended after 8 or even 10 stories, not with a roof, but with the ragged masonry of another
Hey,
half-built
man, how you
floor.
doing?
The
I
towers
can't
soared
complain,
higher
man.
yet, but stopped in jagged abruptness
Hope you're
as
doing
often
well.
as not. Now a good quarter of the great structures, with their massive columns and immense windows of colored glass, lay strewn as rubble across wide avenues with broad strips of bare dirt down their centers. Dirt that had never held the trees they were planned for. The marvelous fountains stood dry as they had for hundreds upon hundreds of years. All that futile labor, the builders finally dying with their work undone. Yet at times Rand thought that maybe the city had only been begun so he could find it. Too proud, he thought. A man would have to be half mad at least to be so proud. Could not help chuckling dryly. There had been Aes Sedai with the men and women who had come here so long ago, and they had known the Koreathon cycle, the prophecies of the dragon. Or perhaps they had written the prophecies. Too proud by tenfold.
Oh,
Directly
shit.
below him lay a vast
Definitely get some
plaza
rest,
covered
bro.
in stretching shadow,
Definitely
littered
need
with a
that
jumble of
for
statues and crystal
for
chairs,
work, especially going in that
oddities
early.
and peculiar shapes of metal or glass or stone, Things he could put no name to, scattered about in tangled heaps as if deposited by a storm. Even the shadows were cool, only by comparison. Black-clothed men, not Aiel, sweated to load wagons with items chosen by a short, slender woman in pristine blue silk, straight-backed and gliding from place to place, as though the heat did not press down on her as hard as on the others. Still, she wore a damp white cloth tied around her temples. She just did not let herself show the effects of the sun. Rand would have wagered she did not even perspire. Workman's leader was a dark, bulky man named Adnan Kadir, a supposed merchant dressed all in cream-colored silk that was sweat-sodden today. He mopped his face continually with a large handkerchief, shouting curses at the men, his wagon drivers and guards. But he leaped as quickly as they to haul at whatever the slim woman pointed out, big or small. Aes Sedai had no need of size to impose their will, but Rand thought that Moraine would have done as well if she had never been near the White Tower. Two of the men were trying to move what appeared to be an oddly twisted redstone door frame. The corners did not meet properly, and the eye did not want to follow the straight pieces. Stayed upright, turning freely but refusing to tip over.
Got
However,
this
they manhandled
pt.2, man.
Then one slipped and fell through the doorway up to his waist. Rand tensed. For a moment, the fellow seemed not to exist above the waist, his legs kicking wildly in panic. Until Lan, a tall man in drab shades of green, strode over and hauled him out again by his belt. Lan was Moraine's warder, bonded to her in some way Rand did not understand, and a hard man who moved like the Aiel, like a hunting wolf. The silver did not seem part of him, it was part of him. He dropped the workman on the paving stones on the seat of his breeches and left him there. The fellow's terrified cries rose thinly to Rand, and his companion looked ready to run. Several of Kadir's men, who had been close enough to see, were looking at one another and at the mountains around the city, plainly assessing their chances. Rain appeared among them so quickly it seemed by the power, moving smoothly from man to man. Her manner made Rand almost hear the cool, imperious instructions coming from her lips, so full of certainty that they would be obeyed that not obeying would seem foolish. In short order, she overrode resistance, stamped firmly on objections, chivied them every one back to work. The pair with the door frame were soon dragging and shoving as hard as ever, if with frequent looks at Moraine, when they thought she would not see. In her own way, she was even harder than Lan. As far as Rand knew, all of those things down there were Angreal, or Sa-Angreal, or Tir-Angreal, made before the breaking of the world to magnify the one power, or use it in various ways. Made with the power, certainly, though not even Aes Sedai knew how to construct such things now. He more than suspected the use of the twisted door frame, a doorway to another world. But for the rest, he had no idea. No one did. That was why Moraine worked so hard, to have as many as she could carted to the tower for study. It was possible that even the tower did not contain as many objects of the power as lay about this square, though supposedly the tower held the largest collection in the world. Even there, the tower only knew the uses of some. What was in the wagons or tossed about on the pavement did not interest Rand. He had already taken what he needed from down there. Had already taken more than he wanted, in some ways. The center of the plaza, near the burned remains of a great tree 100 feet high, stood a small forest of tall glass columns, each nearly as tall as the tree, and so slender it seemed the first storm wind must bring them all crashing down. Even with an edge of shadow touching them, the columns caught and refracted the sunlight in glitters and sparkles. For countless years, Aiel men had entered that array and returned marked as Rand was, but on only one arm, marked as clan chiefs. They came out marked, or did not come out. Aiel women had to come to this city as well, on the path toward becoming wise ones. No one else,
not and live. A man may go to Rudian once, a woman twice. More means death. That was what the wise ones had said, and it had been truth then. Now, anyone could enter Rudian. Hundreds of Aiel walked the streets, and increasing numbers actually dwelled in the buildings. Each day, more of the dirt strips down the streets showed beans or squash or zamai, arduously watered from clay pots hauled from the huge new lake that filled the south end of the valley, the only such body of water in the entire land. Thousands made their camps in the surrounding mountains, even on Cheyendair itself, where before they had come only with ceremony to send a single man or woman at a time into Rudian. Wherever he went, Rand brought change and destruction. This time, he hoped against hope that the change was for the good. Might yet be so. The burned tree mocked him. Aven Besora, the legendary tree of life. The stories never said where it was, and it had been a surprise to find it here. Moraine said it still lived, that it would put out shoots again, but so far he saw only blackened bark and bare branches. With a sigh, he turned from the window into a big room, though not the biggest in Rudian, with tall windows on two sides. Its domed ceiling worked in a fanciful mosaic of winged people and animals. Most of the furniture left in the city had long since rotted away, even in the dryness, and much of the little that remained was riddled with beetles and worms. But on the far side of the room stood one high-backed chair, solid, and its gilding largely intact, but mismatched with its table, a wide thing with legs and edges thickly carved in flowers. Someone had polished the wood with beeswax till it shone dully despite its age. Aiel had found them for him, though they shook their heads at such things. There were few trees in the waste that could have produced wood straight and long enough to make that chair, and none to make the table. That was all the furniture, as he thought of it. A fine silk Ilianer carpet in blue and gold, booty in some long-ago battle covered the middle of the dark red floor tiles. Cushions lay scattered about in bright silks and tasseled. Those were what Aiel used instead of chairs, when they did not merely sit on their heels, as comfortable as he would be in a padded chair. 6 men reclined against cushions on the carpet, 6 clan chiefs, representing the clans that had so far come to follow Rand. Or rather, to follow he who comes with the dawn, not always eagerly. He thought Ruark, a broad-shouldered, blue-eyed man with heavy streaks of gray in his dark red hair, might have some friendship for him, but not the rest. Only 6 of the 12. Ignoring the chair, Rand sat down cross-legged, facing the Aiel. Outside of Rudian, the only chairs in the waste were chief's chairs, used only by the chief, and only for 3 reasons: to be acclaimed as clan chief, to accept the submission of an enemy with honor, or to pass judgment. Taking the chair with these men now would imply that he meant to do one of those. Or the Kadinsor, coats and breeches in shades of brown and gray that would fade into the ground, and soft boots that laced to the knee. Even here, meeting with the man they had proclaimed the Ka'akan, the chief of chiefs, each had a heavy-bladed knife at his belt, and a gray-brown shufa wrapped like a wide scarf around his neck. If any man covered his face with the black veil that was part of the shufa, he would be ready to kill. It was not beyond possibility. These men had fought one another in a never-ending cycle of clan raids and battles and feuds. They watched him, waited for him, but an Aiel's waiting always spoke of a readiness to move, suddenly and violently. Vale, the tallest man Rand had ever seen, and Geron, blade slender and whip quick, lay as far from one another as they could manage and still be on the carpet. There was blood feud between Vale's Goshin and Geron's Sharad. Suppressed for he who comes with the dawn, but not forgotten. and perhaps the peace of Rodion still held despite all that had happened. Still, the tranquil sounds of the harp made a sharp contrast with the hard refusal of Vale and Jaron to look at one another. 6 sets of eyes, blue or gray or green in some dark faces. Aiel could make hawks look tame. "What must I do to bring the rain to me?" he said. "You were sure they would come, Ruark." The chief of the Tardad looked at him calmly. His face could have been carved stone for all its expression. "Wait. Only wait. Eric will bring them, eventually." White-haired Han, lying next to Ruark, twisted his mouth as if about to spit. His leathery face wore a sour look, as usual. "Derek has seen too many men and maidens sit staring for days, then throw down their spears. Throw them down." "And run away," Vale added quietly. "I have seen them myself, among the Goshin, even from my own sect, running. And you, Han, among the Tomanel. We all have. I do not think they know where they are running to, only what they are running from." "Cowardly snakes," Jaron barked. Gray streaked his light brown hair. There were no young men among Aiel clan chiefs. "Stink-adders, wriggling away from their own shadows." A slight shift of his blue eyes toward the far side of the carpet made it clear he meant it for a description of the Goshin, not just those who had thrown down their spears. Vale made as if to rise, his face hardening further, if that was possible, but the man next to him put a quieting hand on his arm. Braun, of the Nakai, was big enough and strong enough for 2 blacksmiths, but he had a placid nature that seemed odd for an Aiel. "All of us have seen men and maidens run." He sounded almost lazy, and his gray eyes looked so, yet Rand knew otherwise. Even Ruark considered Braun a deadly fighter and a devious tactician. Luckily, not even Ruark was stronger for Rand than Ruan. But he had come to follow He Who Comes with the Dawn. He did not know Randall Thor. As you have, Jaron. You know how hard it was to face what they face. If you cannot name coward those who died because they could not face it, then you name coward those who run for the same reason. "They should never have learned," Han muttered, meeting its red-tasseled blue cushion like an enemy's throat. "It was for those who could enter Rodion and live." Spoke the words to no one in particular, but they had to be for Rand's ears. It was Rand who had revealed to everyone what a man learned amid the glass columns in the plaza. Revealed enough that the chiefs and wise ones could not turn aside when asked the rest. If there was an Aiel in the waste who did not know the truth now, he had not spoken to anyone in a month. Apart from the glorious heritage of battle most believed in, the Aiel had begun as helpless refugees from the breaking of the world. Everyone who survived had been refugees then, of course, but the Aiel had never seen themselves as helpless. Worse, they had been followers of the way of the leaf, refusing to do violence even in defense of their lives. Aiel meant dedicated in the old tongue, and it had been to peace that they were dedicated. Those who called themselves Aiel today were the descendants of those who had broken a pledge of untold generations. Only one remnant of that belief remained. An Aiel would die before taking up a sword. They had always believed it a part of their pride, of their separateness from those who lived outside the waste. I had heard Aiel say that they had committed some sin to be placed in the desolate waste. Now they knew what it was. The men and women who had built Rodion and died here, those called the Gen Aiel, the clan that was not, on the few occasions they were spoken of, had been the ones who kept faith with the Aes Sedai of the time before the breaking. It was hard to face the knowledge that what you had always believed was a lie. Had to be told, Rand said. They had a right to know. A man shouldn't have to live a lie. Their own prophecy said I would break them, and I couldn't have done differently. The past was past and done. He should be worrying about the future. Some of these men dislike me, and some hate me for not being born among them. But they follow. I need them all. The Miagoma. Him, lying between Rourke and Han, shook his head. His once bright red hair was half white, but his green eyes were as strong as any other man's. His big hands, wide and long and hard, and his eyes were as strong too. Timmerlin does not let his feet know which way he will jump until after he is. When Timmerlin was young as a chief, Geron said, he tried to unite the clans and failed. It will not sit well with him that at last one has come to succeed where he failed. He will come, Rourke said. Timmerlin never believed himself he who comes with the dawn. And Jonwin will bring the Shianda. But they will wait. They must settle matters in their own minds first. They must settle he who comes with the dawn, being a wetlander, Han barked. I mean no offense, Ka'akarn. There was no obsequiousness in his voice. A chief was not a king, and neither was the chief of chiefs. At best, he was first among equals. The Durain and the Kadara will come eventually as well, I think, Ruan said calmly, and quickly, lest silence should grow to a reason for dancing the spears. First among equals at best. They have lost more than any other clans to the bleakness. That was what the Aiel had taken to calling the long period before someone tried to run away from being Aiel. For the moment, Mandalane and Indirian are concerned with holding their clans together, and both will want to see the dragons on your arms for themselves. But they will come. That left only one clan to be discussed, the one none of the chiefs wanted to mention. News of Couladin and the Shido, Rand asked. Silence answered him, broken only by the softly serene sounds of the harp in the background. Each man waiting for another to speak, all coming as close as Aiel could, to showing discomfort. Geron frowned at his thumbnail, and Bruan toyed with one of the silvery tassels on his green cushion. Even Ruark studied the carpet. Graceful, white-robed men and women moved into the hush, pouring worked silver goblets of wine to set beside each man, bringing small silver plates with olives, rare in the Waste, and white ewe's milk cheese, and the pale, wrinkled nuts the Aiel called Bekara. The Aiel faces looking out of those pale cowls had downcast eyes and an unfamiliar meekness on their features. Whether captured in battle or on a raid, the Gaishain were sworn to serve obediently for 1 year and a day, touching no weapon, doing no violence, at the end returning to their own clan and sept as if nothing had happened. A strange echo of the Way of the Leaf. Jiato, honor and obligation required it, and breaking Jiato was nearly the worst thing an Aiel could do. Perhaps the worst. It was possible that some of these men and women were serving their own clan chief, but neither would acknowledge it by the blink of an eye so long as the period of Gaishain held, not even for a son or daughter. It struck Rand suddenly that this was the real reason that some Aiel took what he had revealed so hard. To those it must seem that their ancestors had sworn Gaishain, not only for themselves, but for all succeeding generations. And those generations, all down to the present day, had broken Jiato by taking up the spear. Had the men in front of him ever worried along those lines? Jiato was very serious business to an Aiel. The Gaishain departed on soft-slippered feet, barely making a sound. None of the clan chiefs touched their wine or the food. Is there any hope that Couladin will meet with me? Rand knew there was not. He had stopped sending requests for a meeting once he learned Couladin was having the messengers skinned alive. There was a way to start the others talking. Han snorted. The only word we have from him is that he means to flay you when next he sees you. Does that sound as if he will talk? Can I break the Shido away from him? They follow him, Ruark said. He is not a chief at all, but they believe he is. Couladin had never entered those glass columns. He might even still believe, as he claimed, that everything Rand had said was a lie. He says that he is the Ka Khan, and they believe that as well. The Shido maidens who came for their society, and that because Fardarai Mai carried your honor. No one else will. We send scouts to watch them, Ruan said, and the Shido kill them when they can. Couladin builds the makings of half a dozen feuds, but so far he shows no signs of attacking us here. I have heard that he claims we have defiled Rudion, and that attacking us here will only deepen the desecration. Rem grunted and shifted on his cushion. He means there are enough spears here to kill every Shido twice over and to spare. He popped a piece of white cheese into his mouth, growling around it. Shido are ever cowards and thieves. Honorless dogs, Bale and Jaren said together, then stared at one another as though each thought the other had tricked him into something. Unless or not, Bruan said quietly. Couladin's numbers are growing. Calm as he sounded, he still took a deep drink from his goblet before going on. You all know what I am speaking of. Some of those who run after the bleakness do not throw away their spears. Instead, they join with their societies among the Shido. No Tomanel has ever broken clan, Han barked. Bruan looked past Ruark and Aram at the Tomanel chief and said deliberately, It has happened in every clan. Without waiting for another challenge to his word, he settled back on his cushion. It cannot be called breaking clan. They join their societies, like the Shido maidens who have come to their roof here. There were a few mutters, but no one disputed him this time. The rules governing Aiel warrior societies were complex, and in some ways their members felt as closely bound to society as to clan. For instance, members of the same society would not fight each other, even if their clans were in blood feud. Some men would not marry a woman too closely related to a member of their own society, just as if that made her their own close blood kin. The ways of Fardarai Mai, the Maidens of the Spear, Rand did not even want to think about. Need to know what Couladin intends, he told them. Couladin was a bull with a bee in his ear. He might charge in any direction. Rand hesitated. Would it violate honor to send people to join their societies among the Shido? He did not need to describe what he meant any further. To a man they stiffened where they lay, even Ruark, eyes cold enough to banish the heat from the room. To spy in that manner, Aram twisted his mouth around spy as if the word tasted foul, would be like spying on your own set. No one of honor would do such a thing. Rand refrained from asking whether they might find someone with a slightly less prickly honor. The Aiel sense of humor was a strange thing, often cruel, but about some matters they had none at all. To change the subject, he asked, Is there any word from across the Dragon Wall? He knew the answer. That sort of news spread quickly, even among as many Aiel as were gathered around Rudion. Unworth the telling, Ruark replied. With the troubles among the tree killers, few peddlers come into the threefold land. That was the Aiel name for the waste. A punishment for their sin, a testing ground for their courage, an anvil to shape them. Tree killers was what they called Karienen. The dragon banner still flies over the stone of Tyr. Tyrants have moved north into Karien, as you ordered, to distribute food among the tree killers. Nothing more. You should have let the tree killers starve, Bill muttered, and Geron closed his mouth with a snap. Rand suspected he had been about to say much the same. Tree killers are fit for nothing except to be killed or sold as animals in Shara, Aram said grimly. Those were two of the things Aiel did to those who came into the waste uninvited. Only gleemen, peddlers, and tinkers had safe passage, though Aiel avoided the tinkers as if they carried fever. Shara was the name of the lands beyond the waste. Not even the Aiel knew much about them. From the corner of his eye, Rand saw two women standing expectantly just inside the tall arched doorway. Someone had hung strings of colored beads there, red and blue, to replace the missing doors. One of the women was Moraine. For a moment, he considered making them wait. Moraine had that irritatingly commanding look on her face, clearly expecting them to break off everything for her. Only there was really nothing left to discuss, and he could tell from the men's eyes that they did not want to make conversation. Not so soon after speaking of the bleakness and the Shido. Sighing, he stood, and the clan chiefs imitated him. All except Han were as tall as he, or taller. Where Rand had grown up, Han would have been considered of average height or better. Among Aiel, he was accounted short. You know what must be done. Bring in the rest of the clans and keep an eye on the Shido. He paused a moment, then added, Will end well. As well for the Aiel as I can manage. A prophecy said you would break us, Han said sourly. And you have made a good beginning. But we will follow you. Till shade is gone, he recited. Till water is gone. Into the shadow with teeth bared, screaming defiance with the last breath, to spit in Sightblinder's eye on the last day. Sightblinder was one of the Aiel names for the Dark One. There was nothing for Rand except to make the proper response. Once he had not known it. My honor and the light, my life will be a dagger for Sightblinder's heart. Until the last day, the Aiel finished. The Shale Ghoul itself. The harper played on pacifically. Chiefs filed out past the two women, eyeing Moraine respectfully. There was nothing of fear in them. Rand wished he could be as sure of himself. Moraine had too many plans for him, too many ways of pulling strings he did not know she had tied to him. The two women came in as soon as the chiefs were gone, Moraine as cool and elegant as ever. A small, pretty woman, with or without those Aes Sedai features he could never put an age to. She had abandoned the damp, cooling cloth for her temples. In its place, a small blue stone hung suspended on her forehead from a fine golden chain in her dark hair. It would not have mattered if she had kept it. Nothing could diminish her queenly carriage. She usually seemed to own a foot more height than she actually had, and her eyes were all confidence and command. The other woman was taller, though still short of his shoulder, and young, not ageless. Egwene, whom he had grown up with. Now, except for her big dark eyes, she could almost have passed as an Aiel woman, and not only for her tanned face and hands. She wore a full Aiel skirt of brown wool and a loose white blouse of a plant fiber called algoda. Algoda was softer than even the finest woven wool. It would do very well for trade, if he ever convinced the Aiel. A gray shawl hung around Egwene's shoulders, and a folded gray scarf made a wide belt to hold back the dark hair that fell below her shoulders. Unlike most Aiel women, she wore only one bracelet, ivory carved into a circle of flames, and a single necklace of gold and ivory beads. And one more thing, a great serpent ring on her left hand. Egwene had been studying with some of the Aiel wise ones. Exactly what, Rand did not know, though he more than suspected something to do with dreams. Egwene and the Aiel women were close-mouthed, but she had studied in the White Tower, too. He was one of the accepted on the way to becoming Aes Sedai, and passing herself off here and in Tyr at least as full Aes Sedai already. Sometimes he teased her about that. She did not take his japes very well, though. The wagons will be ready to leave for Tar Valon soon, Moraine said. Her voice was musical, crystalline. "And a strong guard," Rand said, "or Kadir may not take them where you want." He turned for the windows again, wanting to look out and think about Kadir. "Not needed me to hold your hand or give you permission before." Abruptly, something seemed to strike him across the shoulders, for all the world like a thick hickory stick. Only the slight feel of goosebumps on his skin, not likely in this heat, told him that one of the women had channeled. Spinning back to face them, he reached out to Sidene, filled himself with the one power. The power felt like life itself, swelling inside him, as if he were 10 times, 100 times as alive. The Dark One's taint filled him too, death and corruption, like maggots crawling in his mouth. It was a torrent that threatened to sweep him away, a raging flood he had to fight every moment. He was almost used to it now, and at the same time, he would never be used to it. He wanted to hold on to the sweetness of Sidene forever, and he wanted to vomit. And all the while, the deluge tried to scour him to the bone and burn his bones to ash. Taint would drive him mad if the power did not kill him first. It was a race between the two. Madness had been the fate of every man who had channeled since the breaking of the world. Since that day when Luz Theron Telamon, the dragon, and his 100 companions had sealed up the Dark One's prison at Sheol Ghul. The last backblast from that sealing had tainted the male half of the true source, and men who could channel, madmen who could channel, had torn the world apart. Filled himself with the power, and he could not tell which woman had done it. They both looked at him as if butter would not melt in their mouths, each with an eyebrow arched almost identically in slightly amused questioning. Either or both could be embracing the female half of the source right that instant, and he would never know. Of course, a stick across the shoulders was not Moraine's way. She found other means of chastising, more subtly, usually more painful in the end. Yet, even sure that it must have been Egwene, he did nothing. Proof. Thought slid along the outside of the void. He floated within, in emptiness, thought and emotion, even his anger, distant. I will do nothing without proof. I will not be goaded this time. She was not the Egwene he had grown up with. She had become part of the tower since Moraine sent her there. Moraine again. Always Moraine. Sometimes he wished he were rid of Moraine. Only sometimes. He concentrated on her. What do you want of me? His voice sounded flat and cold to his own ears. The power stormed inside him. Egwene had told him that for a woman touching Saidar, the female half of the source, was an embrace. For a man, always, it was a war without mercy. Don't mention wagons again, little sister. I usually find out what you mean to do long after it is done. The Aes Sedai frowned at him. She was surely not used to being addressed so, not by any man, even the Dragon Reborn. He had no idea himself where little sister had come from. Sometimes of late, words seemed to pop into his head. The touch of madness, perhaps. Some nights he lay awake till the small hours, worrying about that. Inside the void, it seemed someone else's worry. Should speak alone. She gave the harper a cool glance. Jason Natale, as he called himself here, lay half-sprawled on cushions against one of the windowless walls, softly playing the harp, perched on his knee, its upper arm carved and gilded to resemble the creatures on Rand's forearms. Dragons, the Aiel called them. Rand had only suspicions where Natale had gotten the thing. He was a dark-haired man who would have been accounted taller than most elsewhere than the Aiel waist, in his middle years. His coat and breeches were dark blue silk, suitable for a royal court, elaborately embroidered with thread of gold on collar and cuffs. Everything buttoned up or laced despite the heat. The fine clothes were at odds with his gleeman's cloak spread out beside him. A perfectly sound cloak, but covered completely with hundreds of patches in nearly as many colors, all sewn so as to flutter at the slightest breeze. It signified a country entertainer, a juggler and tumbler, musician and storyteller who wandered from village to village. Certainly not a man to wear silk. The man had his conceits. He appeared completely immersed in his music.
Be right back.
You can say what you wish in front of Natal, Rand said. He is Gleeman to the Dragon Reborn, after all. If keeping the matter secret was important enough, she would press it, and he would send Natal away, though he did not like the man to be out of his sight. Egwene sniffed loudly and shifted her shawl on her shoulders. Your head is swelled up like an overripe melon, Randall Thor. She said it flatly, as a statement of fact. Anger bubbled outside the void. Not at what she had said. She had been in the habit of trying to take him down a rung, even when they were children, usually whether he deserved it or not. But of late, it seemed to him she had taken to working with Moraine, trying to put him off balance so the Aes Sedai could push him where she wanted. When they were younger, before they learned what he was, he and Egwene had thought they would marry one day. And now she sided with Moraine against him. He's hard, he spoke more roughly than he intended. Tell me what you want, Moraine. Tell me here and now, or let it wait until I can find time for you. I'm very busy. That was an outright lie. Most of his time was spent practicing the sword with Lan or the spears with Ruach, or learning to fight with hands and feet from both. But if there was any bullying to be done here today, he would do it. Natal could hear anything. Almost anything. So long as Rand knew where he was at all times. Moraine and Egwene both frowned, but the real Aes Sedai at least seemed to see he would not be budged this time. She glanced at Natal, her mouth tightening. The man still seemed deep in his music, then took a thick wad of gray silk from her pouch. Unfolding it, she laid what it had contained on the table, a disk the size of a man's head, half dead black, half purest white, the two colors meeting in a sinuous line to form two joined teardrops. This had been the symbol of Aes Sedai before the breaking, but this disk was more. Only 7 like it had ever been made, the seals in the Dark One's prison. Or rather, each was a focus for one of the seals. Drawing her belt knife, its hilt wrapped in silver wire, Moraine scraped delicately at the edge of the disk, and a tiny flake of solid black fell away. Even in case of the void ran gas. The emptiness itself quivered, and for an instant the power threatened to overwhelm him. Was it a copy? Film this in the screen, Moraine said. It is real, though. The one from Tyr is the same. She could have been saying she wanted pea soup for the midday meal. Egwene, on the other hand, clutched her shawl around her as if cold. Rand felt the stirrings of fright himself, oozing across the surface of the void. It was an effort to let go of Saidin, but he forced himself. If he lost concentration, the power could destroy him where he stood, and he wanted all his attention on the matter at hand. Even so, even with the taint, it was a loss. A flake lying on the table was impossible. Those discs were made of Grendia, heartstone, and nothing made of Grendia could be broken, not even by the one power. Whatever force was used against it only made it stronger. The making of Heartstone had been lost in the breaking of the world, but whatever had been made of it during the Age of Legends still existed. Even the most fragile vase, even if the breaking had sunk it to the bottom of the ocean or buried it beneath a mountain. Of course, 3 of the 7 discs were broken already, but it had taken a good deal more than a knife. Come to think of it, though, he did not know how those 3 really had been broken. If no force short of the Creator could break Heartstone, then that should be that. How? He asked, surprised that his voice was still as steady as when the void had surrounded him. I do not know, Moraine replied, just as calm outwardly. But you do see the problem. A fall from the table could break this. If the others, whatever they may be, are like this, 4 men with hammers could break open that hole in the Dark One's prison again. Who can even say how effective one is in this condition? Rand saw. I'm not ready yet. He was not sure he ever would be ready, but he surely was not yet. Egwene looked as though she were staring into her own open grave. Rewrapping the disc, Moraine replaced it in her pouch. Perhaps I will think of a possibility before I carry this to Tarvalin. If we know why, perhaps something can be done about it. He was caught by the image of the Dark One reaching out from Shale Ghul once more, eventually breaking free completely. Fires and darkness covered the world in his mind, flames that consumed and gave no light. Blackness, solid as stone, squeezing the air. With that filling his head, what Moraine had just said was the moment to penetrate. You intend to go yourself. He had thought she meant to stick to him like moss to a rock. Isn't this what you want? Eventually, Moraine replied quietly. Eventually, I will have to leave you, after all. What will be, must be. He thought she shivered, but it was so quick it could have been his imagination. The next instant, she was all composure and self-control once more. You must be ready. Reminder of his doubts came unpleasantly. We should discuss your plans. You cannot sit here much longer. Even if the Forsaken are not planning to come after you, they are out there, spreading their power. Gathering the Aiel will do no good if you find that everything beyond the spine of the world is in their hands. Rand leaned back against the table. So this was just another ploy. If he was anxious about her leaving, perhaps he would be more willing to listen, more amenable to being guided. She could not lie, of course, not right out. One of the vaunted 3 oaths took care of that, to speak no word that was not true. He had learned that it left a barn width of wriggle room. She would leave him alone eventually, after he was dead, no doubt. Want to discuss my plans, he said dryly. Pulling a short-stemmed pipe and a leather tobacco pouch from his coat pocket, he thumbed the bowl full and briefly touched Sidene to channel a flame dancing above the tobacco. Why? They are my plans. Puffing slowly, he waited, ignoring Egwene's glower. The Aes Sedai's face never changed, but her large, dark eyes seemed to blaze. What have you done when you refused to be guided by me? Her voice was as cool as her features, yet the words still seemed to come like whip cracks. Wherever you have gone, you have left death, destruction, and war behind you. Not in Tyr, he said too quickly, and too defensively. He must not let her put him off balance. Determinedly, he took spaced, deliberate puffs at his pipe. No, she agreed, not in Tyr. For once you had a nation behind you, a people, and what did you do with it? Bringing justice to Tyr was commendable. Establishing order in Cairhien, feeding the hungry is laudable. Another time I would praise you for it. She herself was Cairhienan. But it does not help you toward the day you face Tarmangaiden. Single-minded woman, and cold when it came to anything else, even her own land. But should he not be just as single-minded? What would you have me do? Hunt down the Forsaken one by one? Again he forced himself to draw more slowly on the pipe. It was an effort. Do you even know where they are? Osamael is in Ilion. You know that. But the rest? What if I go after Samael as you wish and find 2 or 3 or 4 of them? Or all 9? You could have faced 3 or 4, perhaps all 9 surviving, she said icily, had you not left Kalendor in Tyr. Truth is, you are running. You do not really have a plan, not a plan to ready you for the last battle. You run from place to place, hoping that in some way everything will come out for the best. Hoping because you do not know what else to do. If you would take my advice, at least you... He cut her off, gesturing sharply with his pipe, with never a care for the glares the two women gave him. I do have a plan. If they wanted to know, let them know, and he would be burned if he changed a word. I mean to put an end to the wars and killing, whether I started them or not. If men have to kill, let them kill Trollocs, not each other. In the Aiel War, 4 clans crossed the Dragon Wall and had their way for better than 2 years. They looted and burned Cairhien, defeated every army sent against it. They could have taken Tar Valon had they wanted. The tower couldn't have stopped them because of your 3 oaths. Not to use the power as a weapon except against Shadowspawn or Dark Friends or in defense of their own lives. That was another of the oaths. And the Aiel had not threatened the tower himself. Anger had him in its grip now. Running and hoping, was he? 4 clans did that. What will happen when I lead 11 across the spine of the world? It would have to be 11. Small hope of bringing in the Shaido. By the time the nations even think of uniting, it will be too late. They'll accept my peace, or I'll be buried in the Khan Briat. A discordant plunk rose from the harp, and the tail bent over the instrument, shaking his head. In a moment, the soothing sounds came again. Melon couldn't be swollen enough for your head, Egwene muttered, folding her arms beneath her breasts. And a stone couldn't be as stubborn. Moiraine is only trying to help you. Why won't you see that? The Aes Sedai smoothed her silk skirts, though they did not need it. Taking the Aiel across the Dragon Wall might be the worst thing you could possibly do. There was an edge to her voice, anger or frustration. At least he was getting across to her that he was no puppet. By this time, the Amaran seat will be approaching the rulers of every nation that still has a ruler, laying the proofs before them that you are the Dragon Reborn. They know the prophecies. They know what you were born to do. Once they are convinced of who and what you are, they will accept you because they must. The last battle is coming, and you are their only hope. Humankind's only hope. And laughed out loud. It was a bitter laugh. Sticking his pipe between his teeth, he hoisted himself to sit cross-legged atop the table, staring at them. So you and Swan Sanche still think you know everything there is to know. The light willing, they did not know near everything about him, and would never find out. You're both fools. Show some respect, Egwene growled, but Rand went on over her words. The Tyrant High Lords know the prophecies too, and they knew me once they saw the sword that cannot be touched clutched in my fist. Half of them expect me to bring them power or glory or both. The other half would as soon slip a knife in my back and try to forget the Dragon Reborn was ever in Tyr. That is how the nations will greet the Dragon Reborn. Unless I quell them first, the same way I did the Tyrants. Do you know why I left Kalandor and Tyr? To remind them of me. Every day they know it is there, driven into the heart of the stone, and they know I'll come back for it. That is what holds them to me. That was one reason he had left the sword that is not a sword behind. He did not like even to think of the other. Be very careful, Moiraine said after a moment. Just that, in a voice all frozen calm. Heard stark warning in the words. Once he had heard her say, in much the same tone, that she would see him dead before letting the Shadow have him. A hard woman. For a long moment she gazed at him, her eyes dark pools that threatened to swallow him. Then she made a perfect curtsy. By your leave, my Lord Dragon, I will see to letting Master Kadir know where I expect him to work tomorrow. No one could have seen or heard the faintest mockery in action or words, but Rand felt it. Anything that might put him off balance, make him more biddable by guilt or shame or uncertainty or whatever, she would try. He stared after her until the clicking beads in the doorway obscured her. "There's no need you scowling like that, Randolph Thor." Egwene's voice was low, her eyes irate. She held onto her shawl as if she wanted to strangle him with it. "Lord Dragon, indeed. Whatever you are, you're a rude, ill-mannered lout. You deserve more than you got. It would not kill you to be civil." "So it was you," he snapped, but to his surprise, she half shook her head before catching herself. It had been Moraine after all. If the Aes Sedai was showing that much temper, something must be wearing at her terribly. Him, no doubt. Perhaps he should apologize. I suppose it wouldn't hurt to be civil. Though he could not see why he was supposed to be mannerly to the Aes Sedai while she tried to lead him on a leash. If he was thinking of trying to be polite, Egwene was not. If glowing coals were dark brown, they would have been exactly like her eyes. "You are a wool-headed fool, Randolph Thor, and I should never have told Elaine you were good enough for her. You aren't good enough for a weasel. Bring your nose down. I remember you sweating, trying to talk your way out of some trouble Matt had gotten you into. I can remember Nynaeve switching you till you howled, and you needing a cushion to sit on the rest of the day. Not that many years gone, either. I have to tell Elaine to forget you. If she knew half what you've turned into..." He gaped as the tirade went on, with her more furious than at any time since first coming through the bead curtain. Then it hit him. That little near shake of her head that she had not meant to give, letting him know it had been Moraine who struck him with the power. Egwene worked very hard at doing what she was about in proper fashion. Studying with the wise ones, she wore Aiel clothes. She might even be trying to adopt Aiel customs for all he knew. It would be like her. But she worked hard at being a proper Aes Sedai all the time, even if she was only one of the accepted. Aes Sedai usually kept a rein on their tempers, but they never ever gave anything away that they wanted to hide. Yenna never flashed her temper at me when she was angry with herself. When she gave me the rough side of her tongue, it was because she... His mind froze for an instant. He had never met a woman named Ilyena in his life, but he could summon up a face for the name dimly. A pretty face, skin like cream, golden hair exactly the shade of Elaine's. This had to be the madness. Remembering an imaginary woman. Perhaps one day he would find himself having conversations with people who were not there. Egwene's harangue shut off with a concerned look. "Are you all right, Rand?" The anger was gone from her voice, as if it had never been. "Is something wrong? Should I fetch Moraine back to..." "No," he said, and just as quickly softened his own tone. He came to Even an Aes Sedai could not heal madness. None of them could heal any of what ailed him. "Is Elaine well?" "She is well." Despite what Egwene had said, there was a hint of sympathy in her voice. That was all he really expected. Beyond what he had known when Elaine left Tyr, what she was up to was an Aes Sedai concern and none of his. So Egwene had told him more than once, and Moraine echoed her. The three wise ones who could dream walk, those Egwene was studying with, had been even less informative. They had their own reasons not to be pleased with him. "I had best to go too," Egwene went on, settling her shawl over her arms. "You are tired." Frowning slightly, she said, "Rand, what does it mean to be buried in Cambriat?" Started to ask what under the light she was talking about. Then he remembered using that phrase. "Something I heard once," he lied. He had no more idea what it meant than where it had come from. "You rest, Rand," she said, sounding 20 years older rather than 2 years younger. "Promise me you will. You need it." Nodded. She studied his face for a moment as though searching for the truth, then started for the door. Rand's silver goblet of wine floated up from the carpet and drifted to him. He hastily snatched it out of the air just before Egwene looked back over her shoulder. Perhaps I shouldn't tell you this, she said. Elaine didn't give it to me as a message for you, but she said she loves you. Perhaps you know already, but if you don't, you should think about it. With that, she was gone, the beads clicking together behind her. Leaping from the table, Rand hurled the goblet away, splashing wine across the floor tiles as he rounded on Jason a tail in a fury. Chapter 3.
Alright, everyone. I'm going to call into this live for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all support. Till next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.